The Ralphie trick isn't a trick, it's what your nonna's been doing for decades. So why are people acting like it's some secret hack? Who else uses the Ralphie trick when making homemade gravy? Drain the pasta, add a little butter, then toss the pasta back into the pot with some gravy. And bam! Instant upgrade. It's a neat little move. The scrambled eggs recipe from the same source is solid too. If you haven't tried this, it will take your pasta game to the next level. Every Italian American in the Northeast does this. It's not a trick, it's just standard. Even professional chefs online use this method. Also, hey, here's a tip. Save some pasta water and add it to your sauce or gravy. It thickens it up perfectly without any extra effort. If you think Pine Barrens is the funniest Sopranos episode, you're missing out on the real comedy gold in Pie Oh My. Pie Oh My is way funnier than Pine Barrens. Don't get me wrong, Pine Barrens is a classic, hilarious in its own right, but the scenes in Pie Oh My? Pure comedic gold. Ralph's priceless facial expressions every time he has to keep paying Tony for the horse track winnings are unforgettable.
He blew the Junior Soprano trial.
Then there's Junior, facing off with the artist during the court trial. Give me $1,000. Yeah, that cracks you up every time. The absolute comedy highlight, though, has to be the strong, silent type. The way that dog was barking like it deserved to be smothered perfectly shows how sociopathic these guys really are. Tony looks like he's had all his energy drained after giving a third of his winnings to some fat guy who clearly hates him. Imagine winning a fortune and then handing over a huge cut to an ungrateful slob. Pure nightmare.
Yeah, you're the guy who broke into Stu Leonard's that time you stole all those pork loins.
Christopher's intervention scene is tough to beat. The line, "You're the guy that broke into Stu Leonard's and stole all those pork loins," is classic. And Adriana's deadpan comment, "Richie had third-degree burns from trying to grill that trout with a downed power line," only adds to the comedy. Tony Soprano's worst murder wasn't what you think, and it reveals just how cold he really was. Sure, Tony could tear through a pack of innocent gabagool like nobody's business, and he literally murdered Ralph and Chrissy with his bare hands. But honestly, his worst move was letting Jackie Jr. get clipped. It wouldn't have cost Tony a thing to support Ralph's instincts and give the kid a pass. After all, Tony promised his dying friend he'd look out for Jackie Jr., and then basically handed him over to be killed. That's a betrayal deeper than any hit. And Carmela is close to Rosalie, yet Tony still manipulates Ralph into having Jackie Jr. killed for seemingly no good reason. You could say Ralph's murder was a fight that got out of hand, and Chrissy's was Tony calculating the risk. But Jackie Jr., what justified that? For a guy who understood psychology, Tony couldn't see the grief killing Jackie would cause, even among his own family. Neither Ralph nor Tony wanted to take responsibility for Jackie's death. They just wanted to pass the blame onto each other. Jackie Jr. sealed his fate when he and his crew tried to rob a mafia poker game and killed Sunshine. Trying to shoot at made men during a robbery was a guaranteed death sentence. Jackie was on borrowed time. But Tony's truly unforgivable actions go beyond that. Beating Christopher while he mourned Adriana, ordering Bobby to kill someone out of spite, and having a cop fired simply for giving him a ticket. These moments reveal just how despicable Tony can be. As for Tony's promise to Jackie Sr., it was never unconditional. He told Jackie Jr. repeatedly that his dad didn't want that life for him. How many chances can you give someone who shoots your poker dealer while high on crank before cutting ties? Rosalie looked out for Jackie Jr. as best she could, but some truths Tony refused to face. Why most trolls get it totally wrong, and Ralphie doesn't. Ralphie is the ultimate troll. Just finished rewatching Whoever Did This, and I'm honestly in awe of his trolling skills. His portrayal of Detective Mike Hunt from Beaver Falls PD is absolutely epic. Nucci Gualtieri will never forget the moment Detective Hunt dropped the bomb about her son's bizarre Cub Scout interests. And Nucci offering her Blue Cross Blue Shield card for his hospital care like it's some kind of credit card. Priceless. If you think Ralph's the troll champ, wait until you see AJ going back and forth with every jerk in his chat room. Now that's next level trolling. This is the dumbest moment in an otherwise brilliant Sopranos episode. Tony kills Ralph and immediately calls Chris, telling him to call back in a few minutes from a payphone. Chris finally calls back about half an hour later, explaining that someone hid his keys and he couldn't find them. Because obviously, that's a great excuse when you're supposed to be handling a serious situation. Meanwhile, Tony is apparently stuck between the toilet and the wall, waiting for the call like it's the most important thing in the world. When Chris arrives, they assess the situation, start cleaning up, and carry Ralph's body to the bathtub to finish the job. And now, of all times, Tony wants Vizine for his eyes irritated by Raid. Not while he's waiting squeezed in that tiny space, but after the adrenaline has worn off and the mess is underway. That doesn't quite add up. Killing someone in cold blood releases a rush of adrenaline that keeps the mind active, even when the person appears calm. It likely didn't hit Tony fully until they were dragging Ralph into the bathroom. By that point, his eyes were probably burning from the raid and stress. Perhaps Tony hadn't thought Ralph had any Vizine, or maybe he had washed his eyes multiple times already. Either way, the request for Vizine fits the situation. His eyes would be on fire by then. Alternatively, the line may have been included to add some dramatic effect. The Sopranos got one thing dead wrong. Ralph got a pass for the gig, but Vito got a death sentence for being gay. Why? Let's talk about the hypocrisy behind the mob's code. Here's a real question. Why wasn't Tony more upset about Ralph's sexual preferences? Janice clearly explained to Tony that Ralph enjoyed getting pegged. Yet the same mafia guys who flipped out over Vito's homosexuality barely batted an eye at Ralph taking a literal, artificial dick up his ass. Their freakouts were all public grandstanding. If Janice had told Tony in front of Silvio and Paulie, he would have been outraged, no doubt. That said, Tony's reaction to Vito's homosexuality was relatively mild compared to the others. Of the whole crew, Carlo seemed like the only one who genuinely cared. Why else would they not care? It wasn't about the sexual acts, it was about the fallout. They even suggested Carlo follow Vito's lead because Vito brought in 3 times the money Carlo did. If Silvio, Paulie, or Christopher had been there when Janice told Tony about Ralph, there'd be shock and mockery, but ultimately, money mattered more than bedroom preferences. Tony was relatively open-minded compared to the rest. He even welcomed the news because of what it meant for Valentina. Plus, his relationship with Ralph was on better footing thanks to the horse deal. He still disliked Ralph, but less than usual. Ralph was a good earner. Maybe Tony learned from his mistakes with Junior in Season 1 that bringing up sexual deviancy is a bad idea in their business. Also, Ralph had smoking hot girlfriends like Valentina and Tracy, which gave the gang an outward show of heterosexuality. Enough for them. At the end of the day, this is a business first. It's made Guy's word versus 2 Gumar's testimony. Janice's word carried some weight. She's Tony's sister, but Valentina's didn't, especially since Tony was involved with her at the time. Even if Tony wanted to act, what could he really do? The code isn't clear that freaky sex is punishable. Vito's case was different. Multiple witnesses saw him at a gay bar, and he nearly confirmed it by running away. That was the real problem. So Ralph's business as usual kept him safe. The rest? Just loud-mouth posturing with no real consequences. Ever wondered how one character can turn a whole show's vibe from complicated to downright toxic? Meet Ralphie.
Ralphie, I love you.
What Ralphie did to Tracy was nothing short of monstrous. Let's break it down. He starts by mocking her after Sil beats her up, then ends up killing her over… what? Absolutely nothing. His brutal treatment of her didn't just ruin Tracy's life. It poisoned everyone's view of him, exactly as the writers intended. Now, here's a thought experiment. Imagine Tracy never existed. How would people feel about Ralphie then? Without her, sure, he's still a snake, but he's also a solid earner, pretty funny in his own twisted way, and ambitious. Would we actually find ourselves rooting for him more? There's a surprising amount of sympathy toward him near the end, especially with his kid's situation. But make no mistake, it doesn't matter if Ralphie had 100 kids in the ICU with arrows sticking out of their heads. He's a piece of shit. Everyone knows it. One of the most interesting parts of that scene is how it puts the other guys in a different light. Take Johnny Sack, for example. Throughout the show, he's a fairly steadfast ally. One of the few New York guys with any warmth toward Tony and Jersey. Because Tony is the protagonist and Johnny is his pal, viewers tend to like him. But then Johnny has that casual conversation with Tony about Tracy, calling her a whore. Tony basically tells him to fuck off. That moment is a brutal reminder. The baseline morality for these guys is subterranean. In their twisted value system, killing a prostitute is far less egregious than slapping a maid guy who violently murdered her. Honestly, Tracy's death barely registered with anyone except Tony. Paulie's reaction? That too, when Tony mentions she was only 20. Sil? He doesn't even remember why he beat her to death. To these guys, women like Tracy are disposable. Even the other strippers barely cared. This brings to mind the prostitute the senator killed in The Godfather part. Tom Hagen's comment that this woman has no family essentially means no one will ever know she existed or miss her. That's just heartbreaking. And let's not forget, Ralphie still killed Pi Oh My, nearly killed Georgie for no reason, and was a thorn in Tony's side from day one. If Tracy hadn't existed, he'd have found another way to do something monstrous. He wasn't changing, no matter how many kids he had in the ICU with arrows in their heads. Ever wonder how a character like Ralph could drop historical facts no one in their right mind would know?
Who does he think he is, Sir Walter Raleigh?
Walter Raleigh. Seriously, how the hell did a guy like Ralph even know who Walter Raleigh was? That has to be the most unbelievable line in the entire show. Right up there with Patsy quoting Ralph Bunch.
This fucking Ralph's more creative than Spielberg.
Sure, maybe people used to learn actual history in school back in the day. But come on, Ralph wasn't just some dumbass. The guy's creativity could give Spielberg a run for his money. He wasn't just a smart mouth. He was genuinely smart. Born handsome, not rich, but with a brain to match. Shame whoever created him forgot to give him a moral compass, any empathy, or a conscience. And hey, not everyone's as clueless about history as you might think. The bit about Raleigh putting his cape down so Queen Elizabeth wouldn't get her shoes muddy. That's a classic story, famous anecdote even. So maybe leave the history lessons to someone else. After watching The Sopranos, it would be nice to think everyone in the mob was witty and dropped clever references about life, literature, and culture. Spoiler alert, that's not how it works. Here's what nobody tells you about the real reason Tony chose Christopher over Paulie to handle dirty work. Why didn't Tony just ask Paulie to help clean up Ralph's body? Paulie hated Ralph. You'd think that would matter more than some rule breaking, but Paulie yaps worse than 6 barbers combined. Seriously, Tony called in Christopher because they're family. There's a stronger bond, and Tony knows he can lean on or intimidate Christopher into silence. Paulie, nothing gets that guy to shut up. Remember Adriana's head injury? That was all Paulie's doing. Tony never called Paulie for jobs like that, not just because of seniority, but really. Would you want Paulie knowing you killed a maid guy? Good going, Tony. No thanks. If it were me, I'd have taken care of him right then and there.
Had to be. Paulie told Johnny.
You think so?
He hates my success.
Paulie literally cannot keep his mouth shut. Whether he cares about the rules or not doesn't matter. He's a survivalist who would blab the second Tony pissed him off and then twist the story so he comes out clean. Paulie was a definite no-go. Christopher, flawed as he is, was a better choice. Even if Christopher slipped, he's still preferable to Paulie, who'd talk about anything. Even dark stuff like that party where the hippie kid mysteriously drowned, right in front of women who could have been squeezed for info by the FBI if they noticed the company he kept. Tony made it clear he wanted to insulate himself by speaking only through Christopher. Despite Christopher's shortcomings, it was probably the best option. Who else could Tony really trust? Christopher was young, loyal, nimble and single, ready to jump whenever Tony said jump. Paulie, on the other hand, couldn't stop yapping, especially to Johnny Sack, who played him like a finely tuned guitar. Funny how Tony Sirico had a clause to never be portrayed as a rat, yet blabbing to rival families about his own cruise business, that was fine. He tried to blame it on a learning disability, but stupidity is a pretty good candidate for that. Here's the dark truth about Ralph's bizarre kinks. It's not just about sex, it's about poor trauma and the toxic mob world they live in. Let's talk about Ralph's unique kinks. Honestly, his fascination with humiliation and the less typical side of sex feels like an extension of the power game surrounding the mob, especially with Tony and the others constantly tearing each other down. Kinks often reflect messy personal histories, and Ralph's seems to stem from a desire to flip the script, being dominated but on his own terms. It's like he's reenacting his mob life and his complicated relationship with his mom, except this time, he chooses to let someone else have control. For him, that's strangely empowering. Now, add the taboo factor. The mob's toxic masculinity isn't just background noise. It's central.
His wife.
She's not his wife anyway. She's his goma.
Take Tracy, who got murdered simply for insulting Ralph. Or the fact that nearly every guy has a gooma on the side. This hyper-masculine, violent environment makes Ralph's flamboyant costumes and offbeat tastes stand out. And that exotic flavor makes his sexual life feel novel and fittingly strange. Maybe Ralph makes all those inappropriate jokes intentionally, so Tony and the others have an excuse to put him down, while deep down, Ralph is getting off on the degradation. It's well known that many traditionally powerful men, the tough guys, CEOs, mob bosses, enjoy this because it's absent from their daily lives. They have to wear the mask of the top dog all the time, never vulnerable, never second fiddle. So when they can switch roles and play submissive in a safe space, they take it. Some even take it further with financial domination, literally handing over money just because someone tells them to, sometimes without even meeting in person. Sex and kinks, that's some seriously complex territory. Most fans completely miss just how shady Ralphie really is, and it changes everything you thought about the show. Ralphie was pure devil energy, no kidding. It just clicked that he actually sent Vito to kill his own cousin. Real greasy move. Joe Pantoliano does an outstanding job playing him. Ralphie is one of the rare side characters to last nearly 2 full seasons while staying genuinely interesting. He carries a lot of weight as a soft foil to Tony, trying to keep things running smoothly behind the scenes. Plus, the guy basically sprays cash all over the crew for almost 2 seasons, which adds a whole other level to his role. Joe Pantoliano is a powerhouse. For anyone wanting to see more of his work, Bound and Memento come highly recommended. Appreciate you watching Sopranos Breakdown. If you liked it, help us hit 1,000 likes. Just tap that button, drop a comment, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next time.